Sometimes the most dangerous words in the world are the ones nobody wants to hear. The morning sun reflected off the glass walls of Prescott Nexus Tower, turning the 48-story building into a silver monument against the Dallas skyline. Workers moved with purpose across the plaza below. Delivery vans arrived. Security gates opened. Executives hurried through revolving doors with coffee cups in hand. To everyone else, it looked like another successful day. To Captain Malik Granger, something felt wrong. He stood near the mechanical access corridor on the 36th floor, his dark navy inspection jacket marked with the Dallas Fire Department insignia. A clipboard rested beneath one arm. His eyes followed a series of warning indicators blinking across a newly installed emergency control panel. One red light, then another, then a third. Not enough to trigger alarms, just enough to make his instincts tighten. Malik had spent nearly 2 decades walking through buildings most people only noticed when something went wrong. He trusted equipment. He trusted procedures. But more than anything, he trusted patterns. And this pattern bothered him. He stepped closer and examined the display. The building's automated smoke extraction sequence was showing intermittent communication failures between multiple floors. The issue appeared briefly, disappeared, then returned again. Small enough to ignore. Dangerous enough not to. A young facilities manager shifted nervously beside him. "We've already had 3 contractors look at it," the man said. "They said it was probably software calibration." Malik kept his eyes on the panel. Probably is a dangerous word. The man forced a laugh. Malik didn't. He continued checking system logs. The timestamps formed a story nobody else seemed interested in reading. Small failures stacking together. Tiny delays multiplying. Invisible weaknesses hiding behind polished architecture and expensive technology. He finally straightened. Through the glass wall beyond the corridor, he could see crews preparing for the building's grand unveiling scheduled later that week. Investors, media, city officials, hundreds of guests, maybe more. Everything about the tower was designed to impress. Everything except the warning signs quietly blinking inside its walls. "I need to speak with whoever approved final occupancy certification," Malik said. The facilities manager hesitated. "That would be Ms. Prescott." Malik nodded slowly. Everyone in Texas knew the name Vivian Prescott. Billionaire founder. Tech visionary. The face of a company valued in the billions. The woman whose interviews dominated business channels and magazine covers. 20 minutes later, Malik stepped into a conference room wrapped in floor-to-ceiling windows. Vivian Prescott stood at the far end of a polished walnut table, reviewing architectural renderings with her executive team. Sharp gray suit. Hair tied back neatly. Phone vibrating every few minutes. Every movement efficient. Every second accounted for. She barely looked up when Malik entered. "You have 5 minutes, Captain." Malik glanced once toward the skyline before meeting her eyes. His voice remained calm. Steady. Certain. "Ma'am," he said, "this building isn't ready." The room became very quiet. Not the comfortable kind of quiet. The kind that settled over people when someone said something they did not want to hear. Vivian Prescott slowly lowered the tablet in her hand. Around the conference table, several executives exchanged quick glances. One man near the window actually smiled as if he thought the conversation would be entertaining. Vivian folded her arms. "Captain Granger," she said evenly, "this building passed every inspection required by the city." Malik nodded. "I am aware of that." "Then what exactly are you suggesting?" Her tone remained professional, but there was an edge beneath it. The edge of someone accustomed to solving problems, not being handed new ones. Malik placed his clipboard on the table. "I am suggesting there are communication failures between critical emergency systems. Small failures. Intermittent failures. The kind that often get overlooked until they happen at the wrong moment." A board member leaned back in his chair. "You are talking about software delays?" Malik looked at him. "I am talking about a system that is not behaving consistently." The man shrugged. "Everything has minor bugs." Malik did not react. Buildings are not smartphones. A few uncomfortable smiles appeared around the room. Vivian did not smile. She walked toward the wall of windows overlooking downtown Dallas. Traffic moved below like streams of light and steel. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she turned back. "How much time are you asking for?" Malik already knew that question mattered more than whether she believed him. Additional testing. Full diagnostics. A temporary delay would be the safest option. One executive nearly choked on his coffee. "Delay," Another repeated. The launch is in 4 days. Vivian's jaw tightened slightly. For days. Hundreds of invited guests. Months of media coverage. Investors arriving from across the country. The largest project her company had ever completed. Malik understood exactly what that meant. He also understood that concrete, steel, and glass did not care about public relations. Captain, Vivian said carefully, do you realize how many people have worked on this project? Yes, ma'am. Do you realize how many independent certifications have already been completed? Yes, ma'am. And despite all of that, you believe everyone missed something? Malik met her eyes. I believe systems do not care about opinions. They either work correctly or they do not. The room grew even quieter. One executive shook his head. Another checked his watch. The facilities manager who had escorted Malik upstairs stared at the floor. Vivian walked back toward the table. Her heels clicked softly against the polished wood flooring. I appreciate your concern, she said. Truly. But there is a difference between a verified threat and a theoretical possibility. Malik held her gaze. Theoretical possibilities become real problems every day. For the first time, a trace of irritation crossed her face. Not anger. Frustration. The frustration of a woman carrying the weight of $1 billion company while someone she had met 10 minutes ago asked her to stop everything. Then I suppose we see this differently. Malik looked at the city beyond the glass. Then back at her. Maybe we do. Vivian picked up her tablet again. The meeting was clearly over. Thank you for your time, Captain. Most people would have argued. Some would have tried harder to prove they were right. Malik simply gathered his clipboard. I hope I am wrong, he said quietly. That answer caught her off guard. Just for a moment. Then he turned and walked toward the door. Behind him, conversations immediately resumed. Schedules. Investors. Deadlines. Numbers. Yet as the door closed, Vivian found herself glancing toward the emergency system report still lying on the conference table. And for reasons she could not explain, she did not throw it away. The drive home took 42 minutes. Long enough for the Dallas skyline to shrink in the rearview mirror. Long enough for the frustration of the day to settle into silence. Malik drove with one hand resting lightly on the steering wheel while the late afternoon sun painted the highway in shades of gold. Most people imagined firefighters spent their days racing toward emergencies. The truth was different. Sometimes the hardest part of the job was convincing people that a problem existed before anyone could see it. His phone buzzed once through the truck speakers. A message from Battalion Chief Ramirez. Any updates? Malik glanced at the screen and replied at the next red light. Nothing official. Still concerned. The response came a few seconds later. Understood. Malik set the phone down. Concerned. It was a simple word. Yet after 19 years in the department, he had learned concern often arrived before headlines. He rolled into a modest neighborhood lined with maple trees and brick houses built decades earlier. Nothing flashy. Nothing impressive. Just families. Basketball hoops. Lawns that needed mowing. The kind of place where people waved from porches because they actually knew their neighbors. As soon as he parked in the driveway, the front door flew open. A boy in a blue soccer jersey sprinted outside. Dad, Noah Granger nearly launched himself across the yard. Malik laughed as his son collided into him. Easy there. You missed my goal. I know. Coach said it was the best one all season. Then I definitely missed something important. Noah grinned. You owe me ice cream. That sounds suspiciously planned. Maybe. Malik shook his head and followed him inside. The house smelled like laundry detergent and baked chicken. Small. Comfortable. Real. A framed photograph sat on the entry table. Malik and Noah standing beside a fishing pier 3 summers earlier. Both smiling. Both sunburned. Some days that picture reminded him how quickly children grew. Other days it reminded him why he kept showing up. Later that evening, after dinner dishes had been stacked and homework had been finished, Malik sat on the back porch while Noah worked on a science project at the patio table. The neighborhood hummed softly around them. Sprinklers clicking. Dogs barking in the distance. A train horn somewhere beyond the trees. Normal sounds. Good sounds. Noah looked up from his notebook. You are doing that thing again. Malik raised an eyebrow. What thing? The thinking thing. That narrows it down. Noah smiled. The one where you stare at nothing. Malik looked toward the fading sunset. Just a long day. Noah studied him carefully. At 9 years old, he noticed more than most adults. Something happened? Malik considered brushing the question aside. Instead, he answered honestly. I found a problem in a building today. Did you fix it? Not exactly. Why not? Malik leaned back in his chair. Because the people in charge do not think it is a problem. Noah frowned. But if you know it is a problem, his voice trailed off. The logic seemed obvious to him. Malik smiled softly. Life is not always that simple. Noah stared down at his project for a moment before speaking again. If they do not listen, why do you still care? The question landed harder than the boy intended. Malik did not answer immediately. He watched the last sunlight disappear behind the rooftops. Then he looked at his son. Because sometimes people need help long before they realize it. Noah nodded slowly, though he was not entirely sure he understood. Inside the house, Malik's phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. Neither of them heard it. A new email had just arrived from Prescott Nexus Tower. Attached to it was another emergency systems report, and this one looked worse than the first. Malik did not notice the email until nearly 10 o'clock that night. Noah had already gone to bed. The house was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant ticking of a clock above the kitchen doorway. He sat at the dining table with a cup of black coffee and opened his laptop. The sender caught his attention immediately. Prescott Nexus Tower Facilities Division. Malik frowned. Earlier that afternoon, nobody in that conference room had seemed interested in hearing another word from him. Yet here was a message marked urgent. He opened the attachment. His eyes narrowed, then narrowed again. The report contained system logs generated only hours after his inspection. New communication failures. Additional delays. More warning indicators appearing across multiple floors. Individually, none of them seemed alarming. Together, they formed a pattern he recognized all too well. Malik leaned back slowly. The coffee suddenly tasted colder. Across the city, on the 43rd floor of Prescott Nexus Tower, Vivian Prescott stood alone in her office. Most of her executive team had gone home hours earlier. The city lights stretched beyond the glass walls like scattered stars. Her tablet displayed tomorrow's schedule. Investor briefings, media interviews, construction closeout meetings. Every minute already spoken for. Yet she was not looking at any of it. Instead, her eyes rested on a maintenance summary that had arrived earlier that evening. 3 separate reports from 3 different departments. Each one small. Each one insignificant on its own. An elevator control reset. A temporary sensor outage. An unexplained communication interruption inside one of the emergency monitoring networks. The issues resolved themselves within minutes. That was what the report said. Resolved. Closed. No further action required. Vivian tapped her fingers against the desk. She had built an empire by trusting data. Data was predictable. People were not. Yet for some reason, the calm certainty of Captain Malik Granger kept returning to her thoughts. Not because he had challenged her. Plenty of people challenged her. It was because he had not seemed interested in winning an argument. He had seemed concerned. There was a difference. Her phone buzzed. A text from her chief operating officer. Everything ready for launch week. Looking good. Vivian stared at the message. Looking good. She set the phone down without replying. Somewhere inside the building, a faint electrical relay clicked. Then silence returned. Back in his neighborhood, Malik opened additional files attached to the email. 4 diagrams. System routing maps. Equipment maintenance histories. He studied them one by one. The deeper he looked, the less comfortable he became. Around 11:30, he finally picked up the phone and called Battalion Chief Ramirez. The chief answered after 2 rings. You found something. It was not a question. Malik looked at the reports spread across the table. I think the situation is developing. Silence. Then Ramirez spoke carefully. Developing how? Malik exhaled slowly. I think the failures are spreading. On the other side of the line, the chief said nothing for several seconds. You planning to let it go? Malik glanced toward the hallway where Noah slept peacefully down the corridor. Then he looked back at the screen. No, the answer came immediately. Certain. The same certainty Vivian had seen earlier that day. After ending the call, Malik began writing a detailed assessment. Outside, the neighborhood slept beneath quiet Texas skies. Across Dallas, Prescott Nexus Tower continued shining against the darkness. Beautiful, impressive, successful. And hidden somewhere behind the polished glass and flawless architecture, small warning lights continued blinking where very few people were paying attention. The next morning arrived wrapped in clear Texas sunlight and the illusion that everything was exactly as it should be. Prescott Nexus Tower stood against the skyline like a promise made of glass and ambition. News crews were already preparing segments about the upcoming launch event. Vendors rolled equipment through loading entrances. Floral designers decorated reception areas. Everywhere people looked, they saw success. Malik saw something else. At 7:15 in the morning, he parked across the street from the tower and studied the building through his windshield. He had not been asked to return. Nobody from Prescott's executive team had called. Yet the reports from the night before refused to leave his mind. Some instincts were earned one call at a time over a lifetime. Ignoring them never sat well with him. He stepped inside carrying a folder thick with printed diagnostics. The same facilities manager from the previous day spotted him near the security desk. The young man's expression immediately tightened. "Captain Granger." "Morning." The manager glanced around nervously. "You came back." "I did. Miss Prescott is in meetings all day." Malik nodded. "Then I will only need 5 minutes." 20 minutes later, he stood outside a conference room while executives moved in and out carrying tablets and presentation materials. Through the glass walls, he could see Vivian speaking with investors. Confident, focused, in complete control. The meeting finally ended. As people filtered into the hallway, Vivian noticed him waiting. Surprise crossed her face first, then irritation, then something harder to identify. "Captain." "Ma'am." She checked the time on her watch. "I thought we settled this." "I wish we had." Several executives slowed their pace, sensing tension. Malik held out the folder. The system failures increased overnight. Vivian did not take the folder. "Our engineering team reviewed the reports, and they believe the issues remain within acceptable operational parameters." Malik was quiet for a moment. Then he asked a simple question. "Did any of them physically test the affected systems?" Her silence answered for her. Around them, people pretended not to listen while listening to every word. Vivian folded her arms. "Captain, with respect, there comes a point where concern becomes speculation. And there comes a point where speculation becomes responsibility." The words landed between them. Not hostile, not emotional, just steady. Vivian looked away first. Through the windows, she could see crews assembling stages for the launch celebration below. Months of planning, thousands of moving pieces, millions of dollars. Every hour mattered. Every delay carried consequences. "You are asking me to disrupt an entire project because of possibilities." Malik shook his head. "No, ma'am. I am asking you to verify what is true before thousands of people trust this building." For a brief moment, neither spoke. Then an assistant hurried toward Vivian, carrying a tablet. "Ms. Prescott, the media team needs approval on the final presentation." Vivian accepted the device. Her attention shifted back to the day waiting for her. Meetings, cameras, investors, decisions, endless decisions. When she finally looked at Malik again, her expression had hardened. "I appreciate your dedication." The sentence sounded polite, dismissive, final. "But the launch proceeds as scheduled." Malik studied her face. Then he nodded once. No argument, no frustration, just disappointment hidden behind calm eyes. "Understood." He turned and walked away. Vivian watched him leave. Something about his silence bothered her more than if he had fought. Because for the second time, he looked less concerned about being right than he did about the people inside the building. And for reasons she could not explain, that thought followed her long after he disappeared into the crowd. 3 days later, the tower looked less like a building and more like a destination. Luxury vehicles lined the curb. News vans occupied entire sections of the street. Guests moved through the lobby beneath enormous digital displays celebrating the future of technology, innovation, and leadership. Everything appeared flawless. That was the problem. The most dangerous situations rarely announced themselves with drama. They arrived disguised as normal. Malik stood 2 blocks away beside an emergency response vehicle assigned to support large public gatherings. Officially, he was there as part of standard event readiness. Unofficially, he could not shake the feeling that something inside the tower remained unresolved. Around him, firefighters checked equipment, reviewed communication channels, and monitored event protocols. Routine work, familiar work. Yet every few minutes his eyes drifted back toward the glass structure rising above downtown Dallas. Across the city, Vivian moved through the launch event surrounded by investors, reporters, and executives. Cameras followed her. Questions followed her. Expectations followed her. She answered each one with the confidence that had built her company into a billion-dollar success. But beneath the practiced composure, something felt different. Twice that morning, she had requested updated system reports. Twice she had been told everything was functioning normally. Twice she had felt unconvinced. During a presentation on the 39th floor, her chief technology officer leaned closer. "You seem distracted." Vivian offered a small smile. "Just tired." It was easier than explaining the truth. The truth was that a firefighter's calm voice kept replaying in her memory. Systems do not care about opinions. They either work correctly or they do not. She glanced toward the rear of the room, where event staff moved between service corridors. Everything looked fine. Everyone seemed relaxed. The presentation continued. Applause filled the room. Then somewhere deep within the building, a communication network briefly disconnected. Only for seconds. Long enough for a warning indicator to appear. Short enough for most automated systems to clear it before anyone noticed. Almost anyone. Down in the operations center, a young technician frowned at his monitor. He watched the alert disappear. Then another appeared on a different floor. Then vanished again. His fingers hesitated above the keyboard. Across town, Malik's radio crackled with routine traffic. Nothing unusual. Yet his phone vibrated almost simultaneously. A message from Battalion Chief Ramirez. Monitoring reports showing irregular system activity at the tower. No emergency declared. Just informing you. Malik stared at the screen. His stomach tightened. He typed a short response. Understood. Keep me updated. Back inside the tower, Vivian stepped away from a group of investors and walked toward a quieter hallway. She needed a moment away from cameras and conversations. As she rounded a corner, she noticed a maintenance employee speaking urgently into a radio. The man stopped when he saw her approaching. Too quickly. "Everything all right?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." The answer came immediately. Too immediately. Vivian looked at him for a second longer than necessary. Then she continued walking. But the uneasy feeling remained. Somewhere between confidence and certainty, doubt had finally entered the room. And for the first time since the project began, Vivian Prescott found herself wondering whether the man she dismissed had been trying to protect more than a building. The first sign that something had changed was not a siren. It was silence. The giant presentation screens throughout the tower flickered once and went dark. Conversations paused. Guests looked around. A few people laughed nervously, assuming it was a routine technical glitch. In a building dedicated to technology, nobody expected technology to fail. Vivian stopped mid-conversation and looked toward the ceiling monitors. Within seconds, emergency backup displays activated. Then half of them disappeared again. Across multiple floors, communication systems began reporting conflicting information. Some panels showed normal operation. Others showed faults. Others showed nothing at all. The uncertainty spread faster than panic ever could. Down in the operations center, technicians stared at monitors filled with warning messages that appeared and vanished before anyone could properly diagnose them. One supervisor grabbed a phone. Another opened emergency procedures. A third simply whispered, "This does not make sense." 2 blocks away, Malik's radio came alive. Multiple system irregularities reported at Prescott Nexus Tower. Emergency assessment requested. He was already moving before the message finished. Around him, firefighters entered vehicles with practiced efficiency. No rushing. No shouting. Just focus. Malik climbed into the passenger seat and watched the tower grow larger through the windshield with every passing second. His expression never changed. But inside, a single thought repeated itself. Please let it be smaller than it looks. Back inside the building, Vivian made her way toward the operations center. Staff members filled hallways carrying tablets and radios. The atmosphere had changed completely. Confidence was gone. In its place stood uncertainty. She entered the control room and immediately understood the problem was larger than anyone wanted to admit. Screens displayed inconsistent data from multiple systems. Engineers spoke over one another. Reports contradicted reports. Nobody seemed fully certain which information could still be trusted. "What is happening?" Vivian asked. The room fell quiet. Finally, a senior engineer answered. "We are experiencing cascading communication failures between critical systems." The phrase hit harder than she expected, not because she fully understood every technical detail, but because she had heard something similar before, from a firefighter standing calmly in her conference room days earlier. Her eyes moved across the screens, then toward the city beyond the windows. Somewhere out there, she knew exactly who would understand what she was seeing. At street level, emergency response teams arrived and began coordinating with building personnel. Guests were calmly directed toward exits while staff worked to maintain order. Most people complied without concern. Some did not even realize anything unusual was happening. Malik entered the command area and immediately began reviewing incoming reports. Every new update seemed to confirm the same pattern. Small failures connecting into larger ones. Exactly as he feared. Then a young coordinator approached him. "Captain Granger, what do you have?" The coordinator hesitated. "Building leadership is requesting your assistance." Malik looked toward the tower entrance. For a moment, he remembered every conversation, every dismissal, every opportunity to listen that had been ignored. He could have stayed where he was. He could have limited himself to assigned responsibilities. Nobody would have blamed him. Nobody would have questioned him. Instead, he picked up his helmet and started walking. The coordinator hurried beside him. "You are going in?" Malik never slowed. "People need help understanding what is happening." The young man nodded. Even after everything, Malik glanced toward the glass tower rising above them. His answer came quietly. "Especially after everything." Inside the tower, the atmosphere shifted from confusion to determination. Employees guided guests toward exits. Security teams coordinated floor by floor. Nobody was running. Nobody was shouting. Yet beneath the calm, uncertainty lingered in every hallway. Malik stepped from the elevator onto the operations floor and immediately focused on the information in front of him. Engineers surrounded monitors, displaying inconsistent system readings. Some emergency functions reported normal status. Others appeared offline. Several communication channels continued dropping in and out without warning. It was exactly the kind of situation he disliked most. Not because it looked dramatic, because it did not. Problems hidden behind incomplete information were often the hardest to solve. Vivian stood near the central console reviewing reports with her senior staff. The moment she saw Malik enter the room, a complicated expression crossed her face. Relief, embarrassment, gratitude, none of them fully formed. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then she walked toward him. "Captain Granger." Malik nodded politely. "Ma'am." The familiar title sounded different now. Less like distance, more like respect. Vivian glanced toward the screens. "I should have listened." Malik followed her gaze. "Right now, that does not matter." She looked at him. "It matters to me." For the first time since they met, Vivian Prescott sounded less like a billionaire executive and more like a person carrying the weight of a mistake. Malik did not criticize her. He did not remind her of their previous conversations. Instead, he asked a simple question. "How many people are still inside?" One operations manager answered immediately. "Most guests have exited. We are verifying remaining personnel." Another employee stepped forward looking concerned. "There may still be a small maintenance team on the upper mechanical levels." The room fell quiet. Vivian looked up sharply. "Why was I not told that?" "We are still confirming locations," the employee replied. Malik studied the floor maps. The maintenance levels sat far above the public event spaces. Difficult to monitor. Easy to overlook during a large-scale evacuation. He immediately began coordinating with response teams. Minutes passed. Reports arrived. More names were checked. More floors cleared. Then another update appeared. One name remained unverified. A young systems analyst named Ethan Morales, 24 years old. Recently hired. Last known location near one of the tower's communication control hubs. Vivian stared at the report. "He is one of ours." Nobody spoke. Through the windows, the Dallas skyline glowed beneath the afternoon sun. The city continued moving as if nothing unusual had happened. Inside the tower, one unanswered question remained. Malik turned toward a response coordinator. "Continue verification efforts." Then he looked back at the building diagrams. Vivian watched him carefully. "What are you thinking?" Malik pointed toward the upper communication levels. If the system disruptions originated there, someone may have stayed behind trying to stabilize equipment. "Can we contact him?" she asked. "We are trying," another technician answered. No response so far. The room grew still. Vivian looked down at the young employee's photo displayed on the monitor. Fresh out of graduate school. New career. Nervous smile. Someone's son. Someone who expected an ordinary workday. Her shoulders straightened. "We keep looking." Malik glanced at her. There was no hesitation in her voice. No concern for schedules, investors, headlines, or public image. Only concern for one employee. For the first time since entering Prescott Nexus Tower, he saw something beyond the title of CEO. He saw responsibility. And in that moment, he realized the story unfolding inside the building was no longer about proving who had been right. It was about making sure nobody was forgotten. The search did not last much longer. 22 minutes after Ethan Morales was reported missing, a maintenance supervisor finally reached him through a backup communication channel. The young analyst had remained near an isolated equipment area while attempting to verify system data. He was safe, confused, unaware of how much concern his absence had created. The moment the confirmation arrived, a collective breath seemed to leave the operations center. Conversations softened. Shoulders relaxed. Someone quietly said, "Thank God." Vivian closed her eyes for a brief second. Not from exhaustion, from relief. Pure and simple. Across the room, Malik listened to the final status updates and nodded once. Every person had been accounted for. Every floor had been verified. The immediate uncertainty was over. Outside, the afternoon sun began slipping lower across the Dallas skyline. Emergency teams continued evaluating systems while guests and employees were directed safely home. The launch celebration would not continue. Investors would need explanations. Reporters would have questions. Markets would react. Yet standing inside the operations center, none of those things felt particularly important. Vivian walked toward Malik as staff members resumed their work. For a moment, she seemed unsure how to begin. That alone surprised her. Few situations ever left her searching for words. "Captain Granger," she said quietly, "I owe you an apology." Malik looked at her calmly. "You do not owe me anything." "Yes," she replied. "I do." She glanced toward the monitors, showing the system reports she had once dismissed. "You tried to warn me." Malik rested one hand on the back of a nearby chair. "The important thing is that people are safe." Vivian studied him carefully. That answer should not have surprised her by now. Yet somehow it still did. He never seemed interested in being proven right. He only cared about doing what was right. There was a difference she had spent years forgetting. Later that evening, long after most personnel had left, Vivian stood alone beside the enormous windows overlooking the city. The tower still gleamed against the darkening sky. Beautiful, impressive, incomplete. She thought about ambition, about deadlines, about success. Then she thought about a firefighter who had walked back into a building after every reason to walk away. Not because he had been respected, not because he had been thanked, but because people mattered more than pride. 2 weeks later, reconstruction and system upgrades were underway. The launch had been postponed, and on a quiet Saturday afternoon, Vivian found herself standing beside a youth soccer field in a neighborhood far from corporate boardrooms. Noah Granger ran across the grass, chasing a ball beneath a bright Texas sky. Malik stood nearby holding a cup of coffee. Simple, unremarkable, present. Noah spotted Vivian first. "Dad," he called. "Is that the lady from the building?" Malik smiled faintly. "Yes, buddy." Noah looked at Vivian for a moment before asking the question only a child would ask. "So you are the person Dad would not give up on?" Vivian felt her throat tighten unexpectedly. She looked at Malik, then back at Noah. Finally, she nodded. "Yes," she said softly. "I think I am." And somewhere between glass towers and soccer fields, between mistakes and second chances, she remembered something success had nearly made her forget. The strongest people are not always the loudest. Sometimes they are simply the ones who keep showing up when it would be easier not to.